Hello, everyone. I'm John, and it's Friday, which means it's time to deploy. Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Yeah, really good, John. Happy Friday.
Yes, happy Friday. How was your week?
Yeah, good. Good. Interesting stuff this week, playing around with some new technologies in the team and that kind of thing.
Anything you can divulge?
Yeah, just mucking around with some Redis and stuff like that, which I hadn't done a lot of before, so it's good fun. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Redis. That's pretty complicated stuff in theory. I haven't had the honor of using that in production yet. I've played around with it a little bit. How are you finding it?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the honor in production either, but in a local there experience, it's pretty amazing technology,
Yep.
right? It's
Yeah.
yeah, super fast, really interesting data structures to play with. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah,
Are you seeking planet scale, as they say?
of course.
That's right.
Universe scale, right? Have
That's
we
right.
moved on
Universe
yet?
scale. That's right. Yep.
Universe
Yeah.
scale. Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
terms that developers come up with to describe these things. It's like not only the names of things just far exceed what the thing really does, but it's also like the terminology to describe the disruption that they're making in all these things is
Yeah.
just, yeah, it's a little bit far fetched, but that's all right. So, anyways, for those of you who are just joining us, this is Deploy on Fridays, the show that Jim and I host every Friday where we talk about the news and information related to Octopus Deploy. And we discussed a bunch of things, articles and the like, and we're doing it live now. So if you're seeing this on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I thought we would just kind of go through some of the articles we saw during the week. I, for myself, was pretty busy producing shows, etc. So we've been kind of doing a lot of that stuff. But some of the things I just wanted to talk about were some of the things that captured our attention. So this was an article that was written by Emily Pierce, and this is talking about a new UI element we have in Octopus. This is the Octopus UI navigation uplift. So for those who don't know, this is what the old navigation looks like, and this is what the navigation now looks like. So it's a lot more kind of cool looking and streamlined. It's kind of like a Ford. It's like a Formula One car versus a NASCAR car, I guess. So there's the old, there's the new. What do you think? You like it?
Yeah, I really liked your description of it there because I know the UI team's a really talented bunch and they've been working away at a whole bunch of stuff over in their space. And
Yep.
when I first heard about this, I'm like, oh, I thought the navigation bar was all right. But when I saw the new one, I'm like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Much better.
That's why they get the yeah.
That's why
That's
they get
why
paid the
they are
big
who
bucks.
they
Is that what
are.
you're about to
Yeah,
say?
that's right. Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
Fiddling with the CSS. It's tough. I even posted a meme about that on Twitter earlier today about how designers and they're always happy because they're living in a really nice world of just graphical elements, and then it comes up
Mm.
to the front end team when they have to code this stuff in CSS, and it's really difficult. So it has to be backwards compatible and all those things. So, anyways, this is an article that Emily wrote about the change that we made and the reasons behind it, and there's a lot more nuance and subtlety that goes into a UI change like this. So it's more than just the aesthetic. It's all about kind of identifying what customers are using in the UI and trying to surface that information. And then, as she rightly points out, we'll be looking at the page header section in the Octopus app next. And then as we continue to modernize the UI. So our UI is based on React, and we utilize a bunch of CSS and front end frameworks for that. And we're trying to make it simpler and quicker for folks to use. We talked about this last week about how we have the new tenants page as well. That was a blog post written by Ian on the PM team as well. And so we're trying to simplify things, make things a little bit more scalable and quick, etc. So great things to see there. And if you're at all curious as to some of the thinking that goes into this, is an article that talks about it. Awesome. Buying versus building. What camp do you fall in there, Jim? Are you a buy person or are
Buy
you a
it,
build person?
buy it if you can. Buy it if you
Buy
can.
it if you can. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
and you
I
don't
see.
have to, and if you don't have to hire a team to configure what you built as well.
Sure. I look, I've been on both sides of this, both experience wise and also justified wise. I am in my later years justifying the buy it, just buy it, because my experience has taught me that it's going to be a lot easier and cheaper and faster to simply procure software as opposed to
Yeah,
maintain it. Now, when I was younger, I understood the need to try and learn and get some experience under my belt. And so building was really exciting. And I know that developers have this tendency to try and build as much as possible because, hey, we can build anything we want, right? But this was an
that's
article that
really what we do.
that Sean
Yeah,
wrote. What's that? Sorry.
That's the beauty of what we do, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We're all artists. Software is art, and
Yeah.
we're all artists, and we can build anything we want. So this is an article written by Sean that's up on our blog entitled "Building versus Buying Software." And the reason why this is relevant, obviously, is because as an ISV, we sell software, and we get the connotation, or the question that comes up all the time is, why wouldn't I just build out my own deployment script, right? Like, why would I use a tool like Octopus? And the reason why is because there's a ton of usefulness, and plus we've modeled the deployment process really well when it comes to doing deployments, right? We know a thing or two about deployments. We've seen it all, and so that's part of the reason why you procure software, is because the experience is baked into the product. Sure, anyone can write a YAML file or a bash script to deploy software or configure something, but it's really when you get into the sort of nuances of, hey, how do I scale this out? Or, oh, I need variables now. How am I going to factor that in? Or where do I get my packages from? Or can I snapshot this and archive it? Or is there an audit trail? These and other things are obviously part of Octopus, which is kind of the justification behind this article.
Yeah. That's the other way I usually think about these decisions as well, while I'm sort of going straight by before. Is this your core domain? Is this the thing that you are there to provide value to your customers on? And if it's not, someone else is doing a good job of it.
Yep. Yeah, I the software I buy Password Manager. I happily pay for 1Password, and I happily pay for other tools as well. The Adobe Suite, for example. I've purchased Microsoft products in the past many times, apps on your phone, etc., etc. So I definitely buy a lot of these things, and certainly these are good justifications for that. We're getting a comment in saying that this web page appears to be down. So let's just check quickly. This is going to do some dynamic checking here of the website. And it looks like either we've been /dotted, to use an old reference, or I don't know. We'll see. Looks like our blog is taking a while to resolve there. So there you go. Sorry about that. It'll be in the recording. So always fun times. So those are some of the articles we've seen on the Octopus side. You're doing some work, obviously, that hopefully may come to light at some point. You always say this in every episode we do, just wait, it'll be awesome. There's going to be some awesome stuff coming down. So, but until such time, obviously, when our next release is such, we'll talk about that. But to talk about some of the industry news that relate to Octopus, the Terraform AWS provider has been upgraded to version 5. This is probably by far one of the most popular providers. So Terraform providers are basically it's infrastructure as code. What these things do is they are the ways in which you can talk to remote resources like AWS, Azure, GCP, and then things like Octopus. We have a Octopus provider, and the AWS provider is so popular. I don't know what the download count is now. It's in the billions. Like, this thing has been downloaded billions and billions of times, and this is maintained by HashiCorp. And so they have an AWS provider. It is massive. And they've updated to version 5, and they've had a lot of highlights during the year. But if you're at all curious, this is just, a continuation of the goodness around AWS and HashiCorp. So just to put that on folks' radar, because I know Terraform is extremely popular. As I commonly cite, HCL is the fastest growing language in GitHub, or on GitHub rather. And people are using Terraform to stand up infrastructure all the time. And AWS is arguably one of the most popular targets of Terraform. So the V5 provider is now available. So worth checking out. We are fans of TeamCity. We use TeamCity ourselves. 23.05 is released, and it introduces some niceties. So first and foremost, a dark theme, which is always a good thing. I'm a fan of dark themes. I don't know if you are, Jim, but I've kind of come around to dark themes now, because I find that for the longest time, I'm like, nah, it's fine. It's light themes fine. I don't need to save my eyes. But I find that when I'm doing more recording, I'm making my room darker like this. Actually, I do appreciate the dark theme more and more. So that's a nice change there. And these things are not easy. Like, moving the CSS around to cater to this is a challenge. We introduced dark theme in Octopus a while back, if you remember. And that wasn't a simple change. That was just something that we had to do a lot of work around. But are you a fan of the light or the dark?
I use
There's
the
light.
dark. I'm on the dark side.
Okay, there you go. Yep.
I've got
It's
a
like the
really
turkey
big
reference, light or
monitor in
dark
front
meat.
of me. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I got a really big monitor in front of me, and I find if there's light stuff, and like right now, I'm not using a key light. This is just the glow off my monitor lighting my face.
Right.
There are no lights on in this room.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I'm coding and spending a lot of time staring at something, taking that edge off is really nice.
Nice. So new dark theme, which is great. And that propagates throughout all the screens you see in TeamCity, from your agent configs to your jobs to your configuration screens and settings, etc. So it's all across the board, which is great. Comes with a convenient way to open remote terminals to agent machines. This is awesome because obviously if you have a lot of agent machines out there, need to do aggregate of logs or install software or debug issues, having an ability to communicate with a remote agent is going to be super useful rather than having to, remote log in to that machine. And so they now provide a means of querying it. Here they're showing how to do this via PowerShell. So to give kind of some context here, there's a little link now inside of the TeamCity UI that drills you over into PowerShell, and then you can issue a bunch of commandlets against the remote agent, and they will get responses back. And in the example here, it's a pretty good example because obviously in their test example there, they have almost 3,000 agents running. So yeah, having to remote log into each individual agent, it can be a pain. So being able to remotely manage this via a terminal will be awesome. So that's a nice addity there.
Nice.
So yeah,
our platform people were pretty excited about this upgrade this morning.
That's right. Multi-node setup enhancements with this release. We're implementing an improved request distribution logic that efficiently distributes the load between main and secondary nodes. So this is the node configuration here, and you can have custom configurations for distribution of, I would assume, builds, because that's TeamCity's primary job is as the CI server. So there you go. Helps with the scalability. Features around security. So integration with Let's Encrypt. Obviously, that's awesome. So Let's Encrypt is probably the predominant security issuing store, etc. GitHub app connection.
What it was like before Let's Encrypt.
That's right. You have to pay money for certificates, and
only one person on the team could do it, and they had to talk to someone who had a credit card. Yeah.
Where's the trust? Oh, we got to fix the trust chain now. How do we install this thing? And it differs from platform to platform. Just a nightmare. So Let's Encrypt was a huge win in terms of that. GitHub app connection, now possible to authorize TeamCity to work with GitHub as a GitHub app. That's huge. So this is showing a connection back to GitHub. GitHub Actions and GitHub Apps are two different things. So for those who don't know, GitHub Action is part of a workflow, and they are typically done on a task-by-task basis. So they are, I guess for lack of a better term, they're synchronous, and they are not autonomous. They are part of a workflow that execute, and they chew up minutes. A GitHub app, on the other hand, is a service endpoint that you host that uses a protocol defined by GitHub and integrates via a security mechanism through identity, etc., to talk between servers. So the idea here is TeamCity can authenticate itself as the individual in GitHub and communicate between TeamCity and GitHub, and then act on its behalf or the person's behalf. And so that's the primary difference between a GitHub app and a GitHub action. People don't often know the two. There's far more actions in the GitHub marketplace than there are apps. There's about 19,000 apps in the GitHub marketplace, and there's about 700 or so apps. And the reason why is because apps are harder. You have to host them, you have to implement a protocol, etc. Actions are, you write them in JavaScript. They're easy. You just chuck them up on the marketplace, and people download them, use them in YAML, and away you go. So they now have support for an app connection, which is great. And then I would assume this propagates the identity from TeamCity back to GitHub, and so it can perform actions on its behalf, which is cool.
Right. So TeamCity hosts the app, and that is what does the communication.
It depends. So it depends on how you've written the app. A lot of app vendors will host in, say, like, for example, they might set up a Azure function, and they'll host a protocol there. So they just have, the protocol is like the web traffic that goes between the two. I think ideally, yes, it would be something like that, but some people do it as a proxy. So sometimes people host TeamCity within a firewall, so it's hard to expose that. So what they'll do is they'll set it up as a proxy, that is hosted by TeamCity, or by JetBrains, for example. As an example, I'm not saying that that's for certain, but that seems to be a common scenario where I'll just stand up a function or an endpoint in a cloud provider, and then I'll on the behalf of my instance, I'll go ahead and do the auth and convey requests that way. So, yeah, it's not meant to be convoluted, but it helps pierce firewalls, etc. Improve support for draft pull requests in the pull request plugin. That's fine. Customizable notifications, which is great. Podman support. There you go. So these and other capabilities are now featured in TeamCity 2023.05. So go check it out. That's awesome. I know you're using TypeScript all the time, and you're using
whenever I can.
Visual Studio, right? That's right. You're doing
Redis
development with TypeScript, right? So TypeScript 1.5 has been announced. We've been tracking the TypeScript progression for a while on this show. And the TypeScript team is probably, I don't know which team is more prolific in terms of releases at Microsoft, the VS Code team or the TypeScript team. I think they're almost competing with each other. So TypeScript 5.1 is now available, and a bunch of new capabilities there. The list here: easier implicit returns for undefined returning functions. Okay, fair. Unrelated types for getters and setters. Decoupled type checking between JSX elements and JSX tag types. Namespace JSX attributes. So some optimizations there. Nothing too revolutionary. So the first example here, if I have an undefined return type like function foo, it returns as undefined. However, in previous versions, the only functions that could be absolutely no return were of type void or any, or any. Any is always the catch-all. Like whenever I did TypeScript, I'm like, make it any. It'll be fine. It's like I unknown and calm. So that meant
a special place for people like you, John.
That's right. Yep, I know. Come on, look, we have to have a type at the end of the day. So this is fine. We found that F1 returns void. Fine. Void doesn't need a return statement, which is implicit. Fine. Any doesn't need a return statement, no returns. And then if it's undefined error, a function whose declared type is neither void nor any must return a value. So this is going to be enforced by the compiler. So little things like this. These things are good from a structural perspective because they help you write better code. Of course, you could use a static analysis tool. There are plenty of those in TypeScript to do that as well. Another example here, TypeScript 4.3 made it possible to say that a get and a set accessor pair might specify two different return types. So an example here, if I have an interface with two different return types, so I have one that if I'm getting a value, it is of type string. If I set it, I can set it with a combination of number, Boolean, string, etc. And then, so initially we required that the get type had to be a subtype of the set type, which meant that writing this would always be valid. And so now we've changed that. So now you can, as an example, specify different setters and getters. So you can have completely unrelated types for get and set accessor properties, which is nice. So no, you don't like this? Okay.
I don't even know. No, it's not that I don't like it. I'm just trying to process it.
Okay. Well, they're just methods at the end of the day, right? They're just
true.
They're just syntax sugar. So
yeah. So something's converting it at some point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you look at the compiled JavaScript underneath the covers, they're just function types. So yeah. So yeah, TypeScript 5.1 npm install, away you go, right? So there you go. You can also grab the nightlies. There's an extension for VS Code as well that you can get nightlies for TypeScript as well. Lots of ways to get this. And so 5.1 is now available. So use it, know it, love it. Our friends over at Atlassian have published their Forge roadmap. So Forge is the, framework for building extensions through the Atlassian stack. So this is something that we looked at when I was part of the integrations team. So back in the day when we did our integration between Jira and Octopus, we utilized a bit of a convoluted framework that required hosted endpoints, etc. And then Atlassian came out with a new framework called Forge, which is based on, it's got a CLI, it's got structured types, and they'll do the hosting for you, which implies a security model, etc. And so they've just published, they published their webinar recap where they talked about their roadmap for Q1 2023. And so this is a huge ecosystem for those who aren't aware. I mean, I know people sometimes like to make fun of Atlassian for Jira because it's, some people love or hate Jira. It is what it is. But Forge is the mechanism by which, as a developer, you extend that ecosystem in addition to other than just Jira. It's other things as well. But they talk about, Forge for Bitbucket and complex queries for custom entities, things like this, multi-user app ownership. These are things that are improving, obviously, the experience. The Forge runtime as well. These and other things are obviously part of that. So if you want to watch the summary of that, they've just published this blog post, which summarizes the webinar that talks about that. I take it you haven't had any experience building integrations with Atlassian?
No, I certainly haven't. No.
Good. It's fun. It's fun.
Have you had the pleasure?
Oh yeah. We maintained the for a couple of years. We maintained, well, the modern deployments team still maintains part of that integration for Jira. So we support Jira as part of Octopus, and that's for issue trackers.
Yeah, of course.
And so we use we don't use Forge for that. We use there's a framework called the Connect framework. That was the old name for it in Atlassian terms. So that's what we built it on, and fun stuff. A lot of watching of messages between services, and that's where logging and tracing really come in handy. This is just an aside, but if you're doing connections, we talked about GitHub and TeamCity talking to each other. This is an example of services talking to each other. Another example is like Atlassian, Jira, and Octopus talking to each other. These are typically done through service endpoints, and more often than not, you're going to want to have some traceability there because there's no other way to do it. A lot of these systems don't have production testing endpoints, and so you have to do it kind of like you have to trace as the system is live, and so it's really important that you do that.
I love it,
especially when servicing endpoints. So yeah, awesome. Are you running Windows 11 yet?
Not running Windows 10.
Oh, you're not? Okay,
Windows.
You're on the Mac?
No.
Arch Linux? Yeah. I use Arch Linux, by the way.
I've switched Linux to Linux on my personal laptop.
Okay.
I'm worried about the learning curve affecting my productivity at work. So I haven't gone the full full Arch
distro?
yet.
Come on, tell us.
It's just Ubuntu or whatever.
Okay,
yeah.
Safe. You're not running Arch.
Never go full Arch.
Yes,
right?
That's right. So this is an article from The Verge just highlighting a change that's coming with Windows 11. They're getting the force quit option. This is very similar to what you see in macOS when you right-click on a task that's running in the taskbar. And so you can see here they have the force quit option. This saves you from having to bring up the task manager. It's the kill-9 option on tasks running on Windows. So I'm really excited by this. My son runs Windows. I probably should get him up to Windows 11. I think he's still running 10. And so without the task manager is always a good thing. And I like seeing changes like this. Lots and lots of features are coming down the pipe with Windows 11. I think that they're making a lot of progress there. It's great to see that they're still paying attention to the operating system, the platform, right? Not just AI. Although last week we talked about how Windows Copilot is coming, right? So
I think it's mainly AI, right?
Well, yeah, it's the hype train. So yeah. So yeah, maybe at some point in the future we can just ask Siri or the equivalent thereof, Cortana on Windows, hey, quit that task, and it won't have to, require a mouse anymore. I'll just talk to it. It'll be the Scotty from Star Trek 4, The Search for Spock, hello computer moment, where he talks to the mouse. This is an article that I saw. How much are GitHub Stars worth to you? This was an article that I found interesting. So GitHub Stars are those that you'll find, as an example, if I go into GitHub here, this is something that we'll talk about. You can see this star count here. And these are basically, so you have the ability of either watching a repo. So you can say, give me notifications when certain things happen. I can fork it, obviously, if I want to make changes or submit a PR, etc. And then I have the option of starring a repo and adding it to lists, etc. Starring has always been one of those nebulous things. Like some people do it, but a lot of people don't. But but people have seen it as a badge of, oh, if it has a lot of stars, that must mean it's a really good repo. But this article that was written for the Guild by Yassine and Alexandria, it was entitled, How Much Are GitHub Stars Worth? What they did was they discovered, so you know how influencers will buy Instagram likes and things like that? Have you heard about these things? You have these like farms that are elsewhere. And so you can buy these likes. And so they've discovered that they can purchase, I guess, the equivalent of those for GitHub Stars. And so this is an article that was talked about, showing some examples of, and they don't identify the sites themselves, but they talk about how people are doing this. It's kind of like a white hat sort of approach to tackling this. And so they talk about how they can procure quote unquote premium stars, and they can buy stars for repos that they host. I don't know why you would do this. I could care less how many stars we have, but this is one of those articles that kind of talks about how these services exist. Like you can buy followers, watchers, forks, stars at a cheap price. Okay. Yeah. So evidently this gives you some clout on GitHub. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the value, and I'm surprised it happens at a scale that there's the need for it.
That's right. Nick's asking if he can convert his Instagram stars into GitHub stars. What do you think?
No, you're way better on Instagram, Nick.
That's right. So yeah, buying stars. Who knew? So this is an article that talks about that, and shows some examples of proof. And they did some work, kind of figuring out some tools that are out there for discovering who has legitimate clout on GitHub and who doesn't. So there's a site called Astronomer. It's a tool that detects illegitimate stars from bot accounts.
Are we naming and shaming?
Yes, that's right. And so there's a breakdown of those who star repositories, and they break it down by those that are seen to be legitimate versus illegitimate, etc., and lessons learned. So I never knew this was a thing. Like I honestly thought it was a feature that they kind of chucked in. They're like, who cares? It's star count, but yeah, this is an article that I thought was interesting. So there you go. And yes, Nick, we did mention you on the show. So there you go. We will show every comment. So congratulations. Awesome. Yeah. Who knew you could buy stars? I guess it's the thing.
People will be happy to know the blog's now up. Nick's in there helping us get the blog back.
Oh, did it go down?
Blog back up. Yeah, I think it might have gone down.
Oh no!
Not sure it was us or not.
I doubt very highly it was us. So Amir let us know about this. Thanks, right? Amir. So yeah, thanks. So yeah, there we go. I like our blog. I like the way it looks. I like our design. Like we've been kind of making fun of designers, but they make things look so good. Like look how nice this is. It's nice and pretty, and I like it. So I like our aesthetic, especially our homepage. Our homepage is rocking. Speaking of dark mode, this is like
look at that.
Yeah,
look
really nice. Yeah. So we use a tool for this. I'm trying to remember the name of the tool. Oh, I've lost it. I had it for a second. It's a pretty popular tool for animators, and I think I remember looking at the source code for our page, and I saw what we were using and stuff. It's not like it's not a movie or anything. It's just it's an SVG animation, basically.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So cool thing. Cool beans. Cool. So speaking of GitHub, this is a repository from the Open API folks. Nice, Nick. To fix the docs, we turned it off and back on again. Hey, there you go. Issue a new deployment, switch it off. There you go. Thanks, Nick. So this is a repository hosted by the Open API folks. So OAI is the group initiative up on GitHub. This is the Open API initiative. We use Open API for publishing our API service stack. I believe we used, what is it called again? We used an old tool called, it's like Honey Badger, not Honey Badger. Swagger, thank you. Honey Badger. Yeah. What am I talking about? So Open API is a way you can consume and also publish endpoints. And we on the integrations team tried to consume APIs this way. And they have this repository that was talked about. This is a Open API v4 proposal, aka Moonwalk, I guess is the code name that they've given it. And so this is a place where you can go and find some interesting sort of thoughts and opinions about where they're going next with Open API. So Open API v4 or /Moonwalk is a repository you can go to check out some of the thinking that is going on around where they want to take the next major version of OpenAPI. So OpenAPI is currently in V3. It's a pretty good tool. I would say the client generation tools are okay. The things that I don't like about OpenAPI is that they defer the client generation tooling to the community. So there's a different, rather than owning them all, there's a different implementation for Java, for C#, for TypeScript, for Go, and they all have different competing sort of features and functionality in terms of what they can generate. Some support certain features, others support don't, and so you get this mixed bag basically. So if you're a service vendor, meaning if you have a set of service endpoints, you're trying to provide a client library for customers, and you use OpenAPI tooling, you're going to get a different experience for each language, which kind of is not ideal. That's just an aside. But, obviously V3, what's that? Sorry?
As I just said, it's standards, right?
Yeah. What was interesting that caught my attention here, so in OpenAI v3, a key for the path item object was limited to just the path portion of the URL. Moonwalk proposes a path item keys can be complete URI templates. So for those who don't know, Octopus does have URI templates as part of its API surface layer. So if you hit an endpoint in Octopus, you'll see this sort of metadata story listed at the end of each sort of return. So inside of our JSON structure, you'll see, first, last, skip, take, etc. And those are based on URI templates. URI templates, by the way, are a total, they suck as well. Like in terms of implementations, there's so many different implementations for UI templates. This is the RFC for it. But a URI template is basically a way of structuring URLs so you can inject things like variables and things like that. So anyway, the OpenAPI team is considering changes to its v4 implementation. So as an example, this is what it looks like to articulate a endpoint in the v4 stack, aka Moonwalk. And then this is what it looks like in its comparison for v3.1. It looks a little bit simpler. I'm just doing a cursory browse of this. It looks a little bit simpler. So it describes things like requests that you can propagate on the wire, the response types that you may expect back, etc. From this, you can generate obviously service endpoints and stubs and things like that. So yeah, it looks like they're addressing a lot of the shortcomings that I thought I thought were present in OpenAPI v3. So that's good to see. This was an article that I saw from the Circle CI folks. Circle CI is a very popular, very high-performance CI server. And this was an article entitled Zero Trust Security for CICD Pipelines from Jacob. And this one was interesting because it basically talks about having a zero trust policy or security model relative to your pipeline. So in between the various parts and pieces of your pipeline, you shouldn't make any assumptions relative to trust. You should assume like, hey, the build server may be nefarious, or hey, the monitoring service can't assume anything about anything relative to its monitoring. So enforcing zero trust security across the SDLC. By implementing zero trust principles in CI/CD pipelines, you can bolster your defense, minimize potential attack vectors, and ensure your software delivery process remains secure and compliant. This is all around thwarting what is typically seen as sort of these attack vectors in the delivery process of software. So you saw things like SolarWinds and attack vectors around folks' pipelines. And so by instituting this policy, having zero trust security for your pipelines means that you minimize that vector to a certain extent. Obviously, there's no such thing as 100% security unless it's like off the internet, I guess. But by instituting zero trust within the pipeline itself, you'll have more resilient sort of pipelines, I guess. And it was a different perspective, I think, that I had considered. I always assumed like, hey, your pipeline's sitting behind the firewall, but that's not necessarily the case anymore, right? The pipelines often everything kicks off on the left where the developer is, but then they eventually migrate slowly to the right where things are using cloud services, and maybe sometimes agents kick off builds, and those things are not, they're not. So your build agents may not be associated with any identity. They just may be agents, like low serviced accounts. And then from there, you get packages, and then packages just get propagated, things like that. So I think that's where, having zero trust helps, but also having a federated identity model also helps. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't have systems that share identity. This certainly speaks to a lot of the standards that are out there, as well as some of the mandates that are coming down the pipe. So, for example, the White House recently published, a certain set of criteria around SBOMs or bill of materials, software bill of materials. And this is all about securing the supply chain relative to your software. So having a zero trust security policy for your CI/CD pipelines will help in this. What do you think about this?
I think it's a really interesting idea. It's such a scary attack vector, that supply chain attack, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
not only inside the pipeline, but at the other end of it, the pipeline's opaque. Like, people can't see.
No.
People can't. Once the software comes to you, the trust is built into it, right?
Yep. Yeah. You would assume you have to at some point assume some trust. I would imagine the implementation of this would be my. I guess there would be a long conversation around like how do we actually implement this thing, and I guess Jacob talks a little bit about this in terms of doing this with Circle CI. OIDC obviously comes into play. That's critical. Not every system supports OIDC, unfortunately, but that's something that you have to take into account. Utilizing third-party secret managers like Vault from HashiCorp, obviously, like you shouldn't be propagating secrets out in the wild. If you're using systems like GitHub, the good news there is that there's like checks and balances relative to secret propagation. Like I've done this once where I accidentally propagated my GitHub token into a pull request. And the great thing there is that it got immediately invalidated. It was only like a 7-day token, but immediately caught it, notified me, rejected the PR, like cancel, like shut it down, shred it, And the nice thing about that is that those systems like GitHub have that provider. Got a provider model, which means it's extensible. So we're Octopus is part of that. So if you see a leaked API key in a say config as code change, for example, or something to that effect, with Octopus, we'll catch that as well. So, but that whole system is pluggable. But yeah, this is all like it's all in depth. Security layered in depth is going to be the important part here. So. But articles like this are great because they really do like this is something that I don't think a lot of people think about. They're like, oh, it's just part of
it, right?
Yeah, it is. So I like this article and I thought, that's a good one. So thanks to Jacob for writing that. That's great. This is an article from the folks over at Logs, a guide to log file parsing tools. I know that some folks might be like, really? Like, it's really, we're going to that level? Like, yes. I mean, log files are notoriously cryptic. And so being able to not only parse them, but also analyze them is hard. And this is why logs, like vendors like Logs exist. And so Logs provides a way of doing that through a single platform, as they rightly point out. Okay, so they're number one, of course, in their own article, but they do mention some other ones. So like FluentD, for example, this is very popular. It's part of the CNCF as well. So they allow you to, establish rules and parse accordingly, and then do analysis against that. I think a lot of people just assume that, a lot of this stuff is just easy to do via Grok, but it's much more complicated than that. Thanks, Nick. Really appreciate the feedback. Yes, it's a log parsing segment. Why not? It's all part of deployment. So logs are hard. So Logstash is another one. So Logstash is another service that you can use, and they have a Grok filter as well. They have built in 200 Logstash patterns for filtering items such as words, numbers, and dates. Vector. It's another one. This is maintained by Datadog. It's an open source observability data pipeline that collects routes and transforms your data, and is pluggable as well. So they have a pluggable observability pipeline. And then finally, last but certainly not least, is Cribble. And this is a company that specializes in observability data management. So so there's lots and lots of ways to parse and pattern match and filter and all these sorts of things. And so if you're looking for a solution around logs, I know it's not the most sexy topic in the world, but this is a good article to maybe help point you in the right direction.
One that'll get you out of trouble when you're in it though, right?
I know. What happened? We don't know. We have the logs, yes? Yes.
Yeah,
and then you kind of like quietly go back to your computer and like figure out how the heck am I going to parse all this stuff. So this was so Open Observability is it's just still with logs. So they have a podcast that they maintain there. I think they're at about 30 or so episodes, and they have this podcast called Open Observability, and they interview folks, and they did this recent interview.
Backstage.
Yeah, they talked about Backstage. So we mentioned this in the last episode of Deploy on Friday. They interviewed Lee Mills around the backstory of Backstage. I like the title. But Backstage is, for those who aren't aware, is a solution that was published from the folks at Spotify. And it's basically a developer portal solution. It's typically used internally. So if you have a software catalog that you use, and most folks do, so they have documentation, they have endpoints, they have service endpoints, they have dependency management, and et cetera, et cetera. Backstage is a solution that has become increasingly popular. And so this article talks about an interview that they did with Lee Mills, talking about the backstory of Backstage. How did it get incubated within Spotify? And then you published it as open source. And what did you need to do to make it ready, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things they do talk about is its support for CICD pipelines. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because if you take a look at their plugins, one of the plugins that is now available is one for Octopus. So this was written by a member of the community, Jonathan. And what this will do is show you your releases within the software catalog aspect of Backstage. So there's a variety of tabs in Backstage. You can take a look at the demos that are available there. So as an example, there's the demo.backstage.io. You go here. This is the sample that they show. And in here, you'll go to a project like playback order. There's this tab here called CICD. Now it's empty. But if you were using Octopus and you had the plugin installed, you could view your deployments here, which is nice because it's a single pane of glass for all of your deployments. So this is Backstage. It shows you on the left-hand side a tree view of what are your projects, what are your APIs, what are your docs. It has an explore function, etc. And you can drill into each one of these and see like dependencies and source code and tech docs, etc. So again, it's that catalog of internal developer stuff that you use, and that's what Backstage is essentially. So this article talks about the interview that they did, and they have that interview up on YouTube. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Awesome.
This is an upcoming live stream called The State of Application Security from the folks at Datadog. This is on June 22nd at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. So if you're all keen, there's going to be Avi, Rory, and JB are going to have a conversation about application security. They're going to talk about, minimizing vulnerabilities that obviously get shipped to production. Given the fact that Datadog is hosting, I would imagine observability will be a part of this. So, but I like these types of state of blank approaches. They're giving a high level overview. So in addition to that, they'll talk about, what really matters when it comes to vulnerabilities, which threats are actually going to be present and which ones do you want to care about. And then what are the characteristics of your application's API that have impact on their risk. So you can check out this, register now. If you want to check that out, I'm sure the recording will be available as well, but it's a live stream. So the benefit of doing a live stream is obviously to be able to ask questions. So definitely worth checking out. And finally, this is kind of like a little lighthearted article. I want to talk a little bit about how the octopuses off the coast of Australia are building small cities. So this is an article that talks about how divers found that there was various octopuses building structures out of shells and socializing with their neighbors. So this is kind of like the Flintstones now. But it just shows how intelligent the octopus of the ocean are. And so this is off the coast of Australia. They didn't say exactly where, I don't think. I'm going to imagine it's either in Western Australia or off the coast of Queensland, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely.
And then they call it the Octopolis. I think that might be a good name for something we can use internally here.
I reckon we might steal that, hey?
Yeah. Octopolis. I like that. So yeah, just a lighthearted article there. And, octopus, they're pretty smart. They know what's going on.
It's scary sometimes.
I know. Crazy. Anyways, that was the news of the week. Thanks for joining me, Jim. Any finishing round thoughts as we close things out?
Yeah, just watch out for the octopus. They're coming.
Yeah, that's right. The cities.
Yeah.
That's right. Soon there'll be skyscrapers underwater. Anyways, if you stumble across this, please feel free to like and subscribe if you want. And we really appreciate it. We do this every Friday. And if you have any articles or any news that you'd like us to talk about, feel free to send us a comment. Let us know. And in the meantime, have a good one. We'll see you next week on Deploy on Friday.